Hi, in this screencast I'm going to go a little more in detail about the box layout and see some other properties of the box layout or the layouts that we can do in our web design. Now you can see over here I have a structure where I have some heading tags and some paragraph tags. If you look at them, I have put these items inside div tags to make them as separate containers, and we can visualize them by putting a rule for all divs, say putting a border so that we can see how they look like, because as I told you that div is a block level element, so it will appear, it will take the complete space. So let's like put it 1 pixel, red and solid, and then if we can see this, we'll be able to see that they are block level elements occupying the whole space provided to them. Now we saw that I can convert a block level element into an inline element by actually putting display property to inline, or I can force an inline element to become a block level element by putting the property display inline. Apart from that, I can also make a block element disappear. Like for example, over here I have 3 div tags with different IDs. So suppose I want to just make this ID, this div tag, the middle one, disappear. So for example, I can put a rule over here, activity 2, and then say set the display property to none. Let's go back and see what happens to our page. You see that it's disappeared. It's as if though it never existed, no space even for it. So it's like, you know, something is deleted and the space is being collapsed. Suppose we don't want to collapse the space. If we set the display property to none, the space is collapsed. Suppose I just wanted to make it invisible. There is a property provided by CSS which is called visibility, and we can set the property of visibility as hidden. Okay, when we set the property of visibility as hidden, you will see the space is still there, but it is invisible to us. Okay, so we can toggle between hidden or visible. This is usually used in forms. When we have error messages, we first initially make it hidden, and whenever the user enters a wrong value, we make it visible from JavaScript. Okay, so this is how these properties can be used: visibility hidden, visibility visible, or we can also use display none to actually remove it completely without occupying any space inside them. Okay, that's the initial part of it. Okay, now in this screencast I'm going to talk about let's remove this. We already know what it does, so let's remove this first. Now what I'm going to do over here is, you see, in the previous lecture and the previous screencast, we saw that each box usually has some properties with it. This can be padding, which is space inside the element and the content, and margins, which is between the elements. Over here now you can see that margin is 0. That means they are too close to each other. That means there is no margin. The margin bottom and the margin top is set to 0. So for example, if I want space between them, you remember I can just put margin, let's say 10 pixels. This is one value, means it is applied to all of them, and then if we look at that, a margin of 10 pixels is provided between them. Okay, so, and since it's all margins will be available over here. Now what I want to do in this screencast is to show you a property where I can put all these 3 divs one beside the other. You see, in many web pages you have items, containers, one beside the other. So I want to do the same thing. I want to put these 3 divs one beside the other. Now we're going to learn how to do that. And the first thing we have to see is, first we need to reduce the size of this div. Now to reduce the size of a div, we can use the width property. Okay, we can use the width property. I'm going to remove the margin now because I'm going to use it later on. We can use a width property to set the width of an image, width of a block. We have the width and the height. We can use these for block or box models. We can set the size of our box using the width and the height property. So over here I'm going to use the width property. Let's say width to 300 pixels. Okay, let's go back and see. Each of them have been reduced to the width 300 pixels. But the problem is, again, they are not one beside the other, because again they are box again, because they are block level elements. They are block level elements. So in order to make sure that they appear on the same line, I have to convert them into inline. So let's say I'm going to say display inline and see what happens. Okay, nothing happened. Okay, let's go back. You see what happened was I'm not able to see anything. They just went back to occupying the whole space. Nothing changed. So it's not something I can do using an inline property over here. So I'm going to set it to 300, and I'm not going to do that part. So what I can do is CSS provides you with another property called float. Now before we go into the floating properties and all these things, suppose I set 300. The problem is I want it one beside the other, but the issue is sometimes, you know, my screen size is 1200 pixels. Now suppose you're working on a smaller screen which is not 1200, so I cannot specify like a width 300 and expect it to be one beside the other. For smaller screens it might not be possible. So the best way is to control your screen size or control your viewport. So what I can do is, in my HTML, I'll put the whole content, the whole page inside a div tag. This is usually referred to as the container or also as the wrapper. So you can call it anything you want. I'm just going to put the whole thing, the whole div, inside an ID called wrapper, or you can also call it a container. It's up to you. It's just the name that, and then put everything inside it. So I'm just going to push it out using the tab indentation, and then I'm going to just close the div I had for my wrapper. This way now I can set the wrapper, just fix the width of the wrapper, and then control the whole process. Okay, so I'm not going to do now as div, I'm going to say hash wrapper, and then this time I'm going to set the width of this wrapper as, let's say, 900 pixels. Okay, this way I'm going to be sure that my wrapper is 900 pixels. Although it's too low for me, but I want it to be 900. Let's say not 900. I'm going to say 1200. Okay, so it's 1200. See, I can do that. But now what I want to do is it should be red, because I put the div tags, the color of the border as red. So this is how it looks like right now. Now I want to put them one beside the other. Now I can control. So each of them is 300, so the total will be 600. Total will be 900, which is still less than 1200, so I can still keep it. Now CSS provides you with a property. Now instead of using div now, because I don't want everyone to be applied to all the divs, so I'm just going to apply it to activity 1 hash activity 2 comma. I have three div tags, hash activity 3. Okay, if you see that, still the same. So now what I'm going to do is, CSS provides you with a property called float. Okay, you have properties like float left, float right. If you have two items, you want to float one to the left hand side and one to the right hand side, you can use float left and right, which will work only for two items properly. But suppose over here I have three items. Now in three items I cannot use float left or float right because there is no float center. So what I'll do is I can either choose to float all of them on the left hand side and then set the margins, or float all of them on the right hand side and set the margins. So this way I'm just going to say float left to all of them. You can see that it started flowing from the left hand side and started covering the whole boundary. Okay, so now I'm just going to copy this because I removed it from there so that we can see the boundary as well. So this is what happened. Now you see there is a problem. You just saw that I floated all these elements, but the boundary, which was supposed to cover the whole body, just went up. The issue is whenever I'm floating elements, they don't occupy any space. So that means this border doesn't, it should be over here now because this is the covering one. So it will go at the top. So anything outside the wrapper will actually come beside over here. For example, if I have something which is a inline element, it will be pushed over here, which is because it's an empty space, because it thinks that this doesn't exist. That's why the boundary is over here. Actually, the boundary is supposed to be here. So CSS allows you to put something called as an anchor, or something to pull it down to say that the boundary ends over here. This method is called clear. How to do that? We'll just create an empty div with a class. Why I'm using a class is because I can use it for every time I'm going to put floats anywhere inside my page. So I'm going to create a class called clear and put it inside a div at the end, the last part, just before closing my wrapper. And then I go ahead in the layout, and then I'm going to say dot clear, and then CSS provides you with a clear property, which can say clear both, or you can just say clear left, because you're only floating to on the left side. Both means it will clear both left and right. So this way you will see now that it will pull the border down, so the boundary ends wherever your activity ends. Okay, so that's how we can do this. Now you can see that now it's like very close to the end. Now we can set the paddings and the margins to make sure that it is in the center within that. So for example, I can just now put the margin equal to, let's say, 30 pixel. So I'm going to set the margin for left and right. So I don't want to change the margin for top and bottom. Let's suppose right now that I don't want to change the margin for top and bottom, so I can just say like these. So if it's like still space remaining over here, so I have the chance of setting it to, let's say, 35. I can play with it and see wherever for equal spacing between them. So let's say 40. So this looks much better now. Okay, because this one is much greater than, but I can set the property of over here of the margin only for activity 1, the margin left more, because here it's the margin of 2 items, this and this, so that's why it looks wider than one over here, even the one over here. Okay, so again, so this is how we can create a column based layout. Okay, this is how we can create a column based layout. Now before I complete this screencast, I want to show you another property which is called overflow. See over here, sometimes you see I have this content, and suppose I also put the, instead of just saying the width, I can also set the height. Suppose I set the height to, let's say, 200 pixels. I'm not sure how much will be 200 pixels. Yeah, now I set 200 pixels. You see, even though I said 200 pixel, now this is 200 pixels. Now even the content was bigger than the div, it overflows, it comes outside, which doesn't look good. So this is called overflow. CSS allows you to control this overflow by actually providing you to say hidden. If you make it hidden, it will just disappear. It will just disappear. We can also do something like, let's say, overflow scroll, which will provide the overflow, but now you will get the scroll bar to see if the content is overflowing. Okay, by default the one that is provided is overflow visible, or you can say overflow auto. You can say overflow auto, and so still provide you with the, you don't see the bottom bar because it's not overflowing, only the height is overflowing. So now it will automatically give you this scroll bar only for the height, and it will not give it to over here because it's not overflowing. But if you put scroll, it will give it to all of them together, even though if it's not overflowing. Okay, so this is what we can do when we are having items which are bigger than our container, to make it overflow hidden, overflow scroll, or overflow automatic, or overflow visible. In case of visible, it will come down. Okay, so this is how we can create a 3-column layout. We can have multiple columns. You can have, it all depends upon your size of the wrapper and the number of columns you want. Now remember that whenever you need that, you cannot make the width of all of them to get equal to 1200, because each element has margins and paddings, so you have to take that into consideration while creating your layout. Okay, so this is the basics about using floats, using clear to actually bring down your boundary, because items floating will always be invisible. It doesn't have a hook. So to create a hook, to tell the container that to tell the wrapper that these are part of the wrapper, and the boundary should end at the bottom, you should specify a clear fix. And that clear fix means you just add an empty clear, empty div tag with a class clear. It can be an ID, but since we want to reuse it, IDs are unique, but we can use it for other layouts as well. We just put class clear, and then what we need to do is we just say clear both. What it does is it will say that my floating elements are part of it and they end over here. Okay, so that's all about using floats and clear and overflow, and also we saw visibility as well in your CSS layouts.